Couples therapists, without breaking confidentiality, what are some relationships that instantly set off red flags, and do you try and get them to work out? One partner says they're seeking your services to help them determine if they want to stay together. The other partner says they're seeking your services to make it so they stay together. Then it's about highlighting the points and allowing the person who is on the fence decide what they want. Since the other person knows. Edit. I am sorry to be reading about how many people experience being the person who wanted to stay together when their partner was unsure. I hope that, whatever happened, you have found or are finding happiness again. I saw a couple that was doing retaliatory cheating and telling each other about it. And they got through their anger. They decided to call a truce and made peace. With their level of emotional maturity, I doubt it lasted. I don't know if I helped them or prolonged their suffering. It was their decision to come to counseling. So I think it was the help they wanted. Other clients realize what they really want is divorce counseling. What's the best way to behave civilly and minimize damage to the kids while we go our separate ways? I think it would be great if divorce counseling were normalized. People who approach therapy with the idea that they must convince the therapist that they're right and their partner is wrong. Almost like they're complaining to a parent or boss to have them sort out the problems. I'm not a therapist. But my therapist straight face told me that there are worse options than divorce. Got divorced and it was the best thing that happened to me. Contempt. When I experience true contempt from one in the relationship, I know it is usually over. Look towards a peaceful ending at that point if possible. Relationship therapist here. One of the biggest red flags I see when working with a new couple is when they've totally forgotten the good. Part of relationship therapy is reconnecting a couple with what they like about each other. What initially attracted them to each other. And what the positives are between them. And people come in and they've been so unhappy for so long that they actually can't remember what it was like to be in love. Or to even like each other. They're just about hopeless. You don't have to be happy for therapy to work, but if you can't even reminisce about the good times, then the good times are probably over. Edit. This is clearly resonating with some folks. So I'd like to recommend a book. If you find yourself in this situation, check out Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. She gives some solid explanations of how people get into this cycle, as well as some suggestions on how to try and navigate it. When I see a couple in which one or both of the members are seeking to change something fundamental about the other person, we process where the need for the change comes from and the person with the issue evaluates whether it's a deal breaker for them or not. We work on acceptance and tolerance of others. I also recommend my couples are also in individual therapy on their own. Edit. Typing this on my phone. Period after first sentence should be a comma. Edit. Thanks for the awards, pals. Remember, we wake up every day and decide if we want to choose our partners. A long-term relationship is a multitude of days when you've woken up and said yes. It's very easy to work out when one person knowingly prioritizes their own wants and needs over their partner's. Relationships like this are often doomed because the person simply doesn't care enough to make any meaningful change. Someone else's response made me think of this one. When a partner raises objection to meeting with me individually. During the first session I share that during assessment I like to meet with them both together and once each individually. Occasionally I'll have partners who suddenly become very critical or suspicious about this. Asking why I do that. And is it ethical? And the classic "I've never heard of a marriage counselor doing that before." It goes beyond curiosity or simply inquiring about practice. There is an incredulous and almost panicked tone to it. And sure enough, every single time, they turn out to be some variation of controlling, manipulative, abusive. Edit. Just to clarify for a few of the comments, I'm not talking about doing concurrent, ongoing individual and couples sessions. This is just a one-off individual assessment session. My first 3 sessions are usually 1, couples session, 2, partner A individual, and 3, partner B individual. After that we are typically only as a couple. Unless another one-off is needed for further assessment down the road. If needed, I refer out for ongoing concurrent individual or pause for more intensive individual. And thanks for the silver and awards. I was in couples therapy. At the end of the first session, the therapist asked us to say one nice thing about each other. I went first. Said something nice about him. Therapist asked him to say something. And he replied, "My mother always told me if you can't say something nice, say nothing. So I'll say nothing." Felt so sorry for the therapist. And yes, that's when I started planning my exit. I am now very happy in a new relationship and my revenge is to be living my beat life. Very happy now. All hail the beat life. When one person is entirely dependent on the other, especially at a relatively young age, I mean financially and emotionally, these are typically young women, sometimes young men as well, who do not work, do not have children, stay home all day and have no friends or hobbies outside of hanging out with their spouse. Very unhealthy. And a huge red flag. Always ends in a painful and messy breakup. Generally, we try to get them to find a friend, join a community, get a job or volunteer, something to provide them with self-worth and personal fulfillment outside of their spouse. Whataboutism. Instead of taking ownership and responsibility for their contribution to the degradation of the relationship, one or both parties simply point out an example of the other exhibiting a similar behavior. It's a red flag because it illustrates their lack of self-awareness and poor communication skills. Communication is key when trying to mend a tattered relationship because without respectful communication the conflict recovery process can never begin. In the conflict recovery model, both parties agree to the terms under which they will communicate. No yelling. No interrupting. No "I told you so's," etc. Each party gets a chance to share how the other's actions make them feel. Then they each propose their solutions and identify where they made assumptions or where they got triggered and why. Then they identify where they're willing to compromise. Next, we create an actionable plan with deadlines and we monitor the progress to see if the proposed solutions were effective. Everything can go too. But once communication stagnates, you're in real trouble. So even if you're arguing, you're still doing okay. You just need to work on how you're communicating. I'll just say that if you find yourself screaming "I'm not," I'm yelling at you, you might have a communication problem. Edit. I want to add a more thoughtful note. But I should also mention that I mainly work with individuals. Similar to what others have said. A red list of flags for me is when clients try to get me to take sides. I can understand why people may do that every now and then during more difficult discussions. But if it happens consistently, it's a huge problem. There are plenty of reasons that people may do this. But the reality is that therapy is meant to foster cooperation between partners. Feeling like you need the therapist on your side indicates you're approaching the relationship as a competition, not a cooperative interaction. And nothing good comes from that. Also, I once had a supervisor who did a great deal of couples work tell me that it has such a bad success rate because people rarely come before the relationship has crossed the point of no return. Unfortunately, that seems to be a very accurate description. Constant. Needless escalation. When I don't think we need this expensive thing is escalated to "you don't really love me" major problem. It shows up quickly in therapy if you're watching for it. Mostly because the one using this to avoid accountability is almost guaranteed to play this card in relation to therapy itself. Either I had to drag them here or they're just trying to break up with me. What they're doing is avoiding conversation about the issue by blowing it up into a bigger problem than it is. So they can make the other person respond to their feelings rather than dealing with their concerns. Not my client. But I had to watch as my own roommate dealt with her fiance. He was A. Controlling her, physically, activities, financials. B. Continuously dismissing her feelings, assessments, opinions. Fiance would revert to baby talk. Speaking to roommate like she was an uneducated child. Daddy knows best type of gaslighting garbage. C. Trying to hide his narcissistic tendencies behind his good church boy exterior. This was all happening in my condo while she was waiting to move out and marry him. I usually tried to stay out of their issues. But one afternoon I softly encouraged her, saying I agreed with her an argument I'd witnessed earlier in the day. She came back that night after the fiancé convinced her that I was jealous and was trying to break them up so I could have him. She barely talked to me again until she moved out. Sadly they did get married, have 2 kids, and she's a completely isolated stay-at-home mom. I don't even want to imagine what it's like for her at home. My mom is a therapist and she sometimes tells me a little bit about her cases, nothing specific or identifying. She once came home really upset about a case and told me a little bit. Basically this guy sent his wife in because she was having trouble with the baby. He came with her and interrupted her at basically every turn and basically told my mom his wife was bipolar. In another session the patient admitted she almost felt angry with the baby and herself because she knew she would be a terrible mother. Her husband had been saying it since she got pregnant. My mom told me it became almost instantly clear that the husband was manipulative and abusive, and probably trying to stop her from connecting with the child. As soon as my mom suggested she was angry with her husband and not her baby, all of their future sessions were cancelled. High conflict relationships. If frequent and bitter conflict began a few months, or less, after the relationship began, and continued, relationship therapy is going to be a shy won't be helpful. Either the conflict will continue indefinitely, or come to an end. Not just my opinion. The research supports this. Edit. If you've been there, I'd be interested to hear some stories about this. And so would other Redditors. If you were able to fix a high conflict relationship like this. I'm not a couples therapist, but I recommended a couples therapist to a co-worker for some premarital counseling. My partner and I had really enjoyed our premarital sessions from this super nice therapist, and when a girl from my work got engaged she asked for his number. The day after their first session I got a call from the girl saying, "I can't believe you sent me to this horrible, invasive, rude counselor." I was in a panic. "Oh no. What happened?" She explained. "We went in there and sat down and the first thing he asked was, 'So, why do you want to get married? How rude is that? How dare he?' That's when I realized that maybe their relationship wasn't going to pan out. They called off the wedding a few months later." As a clinical psychologist, I focused mainly on behavioral medicine and cognitive assessment, but did my fair share of marriage couples work. Refusal or inability to compromise is a ginormous red flag. One that, I believe, is empirically validated. Compromise is a significant predictor of satisfaction in relationships, and it plays an important role in the long-term success of marriages and relationships in general. I'm reading through these as a mental checklist to keep in check my own actions, not just my partner's. Thanks everyone for sharing. All these responses have made me so much more grateful for my younger sister, who pestered me until I was in tears of anger to leave my ex. Within a week I could see how much better my life was without him. I'll never be able to tell her how much it means to me that she was ready for me to hate her, as long as it meant I was away from him. My mom is a couples therapist and she says there are some people that she has told you're not going to work out on the first couple sessions. Good question. I doubt I have much to add that others haven't already said, but the biggest one I notice is respect. Respecting space, boundaries, feelings, interests. Relationships are also important, and lack of respect by either person for the other is going to mean big problems. I would definitely try to help them work through it, but it's hard to point out to someone that something they are doing is hurting the other. Which leads to my second red flag. I'm a therapist, newer to couples counseling. But one of the flags I've seen is one person digging their heels in and not accepting any feedback or suggestions. Then that person tells me and partner that they are trying. I called him out on it. Said that he needed to evaluate what he's willing to do and not do. Needless to say, didn't hear back from them. Another weird one is separating without a plan. All that's gonna do is teach you how to live without each other emo. I would ask them, okay, how do you know when the separation works? I don't know. When I start missing them, I guess, is what I typically hear. Saying directly to each other, I don't love you. I am just here to try and like you enough to stay together. And the other person replaying with good. We can do that. Partners refusing to listen. Absolutely deafening themselves to certain explicit statement. Active physical abuse and each person admitting it and trying to be okay with it. Name calling in session, and when I intervene they both get mad at me. Complete disrespect and true contempt with each other. Yet refusing to accept their relationship is over. I could keep going. These are obvious red flags. Gottman's research does a good job of answering the opposite of this question. He studies what factors predict a couple will stay together. He has like 90% accuracy. I was just talking about this case today. Years ago when I was starting out, I had a female client come in and she reported anxiety, depression, etc. because her ex-husband was bothering her. I thought that was completely average and normal. So I asked her about it. She recounted many times that her and the ex clashed. I said, you know, you don't have to interact with him and maybe just distancing yourself is the way to go. Then she told me that they still lived together and had no plans of moving. The red flag. Indicted I was dealing with two crazy people. Reading all of this just makes me realize how lucky I was to muster up the power to break up with my ex. I knew she was horrible and toxic towards the end of things, but holy, it's worse than I thought. I've seen individuals but did coursework in couples therapy. It's always a dooming sign when one of the patients doesn't want to be there and is unwilling to try. Those never end well. This thread made me realize how toxic and abusive my last relationship was. It makes me sick till this day when I think of the gaslight and manipulations I went through to cover up his lies. A friend from HS's parents went to counseling. The therapist probably realized it wasn't going to work when she started eyeing the husband. Edit. To whoever gave this a wholesome award. Thank you. What I loved about our marriage counselor is from the start he said his job wasn't to try to get us to stay together but guide us for us to figure if we should be together. I don't focus on couples counseling, but I do have some couples therapy session from time to time. If you are in a relationship, some advice that will help you out. You will typically find yourselves in 3 metaphorical positions. 1. Face to face. When you are here, you are feeding into each other, building each other up and communicating. 2. Side by side. This is when you both are working together on a problem to find a solution. It's not forcing one to do all the work, but you both are taking responsibility. 3. Back to back. This is a position you never want to be in because you take your focus off each other and you go your own directions. You either end up with one person pulling the other or a gap is formed. This position also says I don't care about your input. God, I'm so end effective. That's how I feel reading the comments. Figuring out what the problem is 80% of solving it. I was a complete jerk to my wife, who I love dearly. From time to time, we found a random or safe word that she can say when I'm acting like an ass. And it works every time. I shut my mouth and listen. Sometimes we care too much about ourselves and not enough about our partners. It really helped me see that. And our relationship is much stronger today than a year ago. Despite COVID. I've seen a family that presents everything as alright. That's a red flag. Almost everything is certainly not alright, even in the most functional relationships. In fact, it's one of the most commonly misheld beliefs that there are perfect relationships. To your second question, yes and no. Yes, I do try to get them to work it out, but that's all dependent on what they think, feel, and want to happen. Sometimes it's just helping them realize what they want. Over this 34-year marriage, we've gone to 5 different therapists that ranged from a resource provider to a psychiatrist. 3 of those we arrived for the first session with the wife drunk. She's pretty much a functioning alcoholic narcissist. That's pretty much how the marriage has been. One more child to get graduated and out of the house. Then divorce. And this, folks, is multiple red flags in one. Seriously. Staying together for the kids never works out. It's an unhealthy mindset that labels kids as a burden. Kids are surprisingly observant. They'll pick up on their parents' lack of love for each other. They also in general end up worse off. Lots of trauma to work through later in life. Commonly. We need a serious tag for this OP. Therapist. So you're considering ending the marriage? Wife. I am sick of all the Star Wars puns. Husband. Divorce is strong with this one. Once. I had a live-in girlfriend call 911 and say, I am afraid for my life. The astute operator, an older black woman, asked, has he hit you? No. Has he threatened you? No. Has he raised his hand toward you? No. Has he even raised his voice? No. The 911 service is for emergencies. Please do not call with this kind of thing again. When our therapist heard this, she just sat up straight in her chair and said, oh. Well. I can provide you counseling as you complete your breakup. But there are certain things that we counselors agree no relationship can ever come back from. This is one of them. This thread is peak. I'm not a doctor but I know one. Searching for any identifiers of when me and my ex-wife tried therapy. My ex-wife used our sessions against me. Therapist. What's something he's done that didn't sit well with you? Ex. Well, 5 years ago he bought me a diamond bracelet but it was on sale. Later at home. I completely forgot you did that, so now I'm going to bring it up every second of every day for the next month. As a therapist, it's not my place to try to get them to reunify. That takes their power and gives it to me instead of me teaching them skills to make their own informed decision. That being said, whenever one half of the couple comes in and says they're there because their spouse made them come, it's pretty rare that they decide to stay together. Just for your information, it's a commonly known thing in psych that you shouldn't go to therapy with your abusers. Abusive people are manipulative and charming and liars. Society has already conditioned people to side with abusers against women. Therapists often end up thinking the victim is actually the abuser based on what the abuser spins up. Read Why Does He Do That? If you're curious about how to spot abuse. Edit. The replies to this are kind of proving my point. But women can be abusers. And society sides with women always. In a world where feminism had succeeded, the replies would have been, what can we do to eliminate bias in therapeutic practices? Or why does this happen? But now, just people sucking. Any episode of 90 Day Fiancé registered sign should sum it all up for ya. People are the worst at couples counseling. They keep asking, have you tried turning it off and on again? As long as there is no abuse, and all parties still have feelings of love or regard for the other, just about any relationship can be salvageable with a re-establishing, or in some cases, establishing for the first time, healthy communication patterns. Of course, all parties have to want to put in the work as well. Nareosarue copyright airing. Edit. Didn't expect to get this much conversation going. But glad so many people have felt comfortable talking about this. I want to clarify one thing. Not wanting to put in the work on a relationship does not automatically make someone a villain. It is very possible to decide from a place of compassion, and even love, that you and your partner, simply are at separate places in life, have opposing values, or perhaps are just not compatible. It can be the case that deciding to let go is an act of compassion. My original intent was only to say that when both parties are committed to fixing a non-toxic relationship, I've seen a lot of seemingly unreconcilable issues be settled. I hate to be that person, but what does it mean when your spouse fears you going places without them? I've recently lost all my mom weight from just being busy and stressed from having kids and whatnot. I'm finally hot again and I'm enjoying it. My husband, who I thought would be thrilled, is not so much. He is definitely attracted to me, but he is also very insecure. Now he seems super vigilant about where I'm going and how long I'm gone. Or if I was alone. He literally won't let me go anywhere alone anymore. If I try to do so, he gets suspicious. Dude, I'm literally just getting groceries. You just answered your own question. When the other person truly refuses to take any responsibility for anything in the relationship going wrong. Just because they didn't intend for something to be insulting or hurtful to them meant I wasn't allowed to take it that way. Denial they may have about dealing with feelings. Issues. Anything else. So here was my problem with couples counseling. My ex-wife used it to remember I had done years prior and then wouldn't shut up about it until the next session. Sounds like a problem with your ex-wife. Not a relationship therapist, but once worked with a woman whose boyfriend had sexually assaulted a client while he was at work, but she was convinced it was just a misunderstanding. So I knew that was a relationship that wouldn't last and that she struggled to pick stable partners. I was right. One of the big red flags I look for is meta conversation. Example to use for sake of discussion. Partner 1 is mad THQT, partner 2 doesn't help out at home more. There are always two levels of communication. One is the direct message intended, please clean up the dishes, and the second is communication about the communication, I expect you to do what I ask. When communication about the communication turns me to the message gets muddled and a power struggle erupts from misunderstandings. Tone, body language, and the way one responds to the request all become the focal point. If the arguments don't fall into meta arguments, then that's a sign the couple has a strong foundation. And the work is usually about exploring expectations of the relationship or readjusting roles. If they fall into meta arguments, it's a sign the couple needs to build up their foundation, which will likely lead to them able to adjust the roles themselves once that happens. Two different approaches. Same base issue at hand.